This program will inform and educate viewers on the underlying reasons behind many of today's grim and troubling events. You know what makes you mad? You know that there are bad things coming just over the horizon. You watch and listen to lots of podcasts and blogs that give their opinions on what's wrong and what's to come. But nobody is talking about what comes next.
And are we live, Big E?
Yeah, we're good.
Oh, rock on. Hey, everybody. Hey, Big Eric. Hey, world. It's Herbie here. By the way, before we get started, thank you to Pure 5 Extractions, as always, at the top of the cannabis industry. In fact, I don't know if obviously you guys haven't seen it. This is my coffee cup, coffee, dogs, and weed. It's the three key food groups to happiness in life. Anyway. It's early Sunday morning, and here we are, and let's talk about what's going on. Before I get into the tariff thing and explain it so that people can actually understand what's going on, I want to spend a moment on the California thing. Is that okay with you, Eric? I'm going to talk about the fires.
Fires, the wildfires.
So let me tell you, California, what's going on now is a demonstration of what happens when you fuck with pricing. Okay, so prices of everything is the way that the economy tells us what's going on. Pricing is the language of the economy. Pricing is how we understand value, how we understand if it's something we want, we don't want, necessary, unnecessary. It's all about pricing. And the free market sets pricing based on the supply of whatever it is that people are going to buy and the demand for it. So let's start with insurance, because the party line. When I say party, California is a one-party state. It's just 100% Democrat. And they control everything. They have a supermajority in the California legislature. So basically, Newsom can govern as a dictator and has. And he's spent a lot of money on a lot of stupid shit. But the most stupid thing he's done is interfere with pricing. And all politicians do this. So I'll give you a couple of examples of what I'm talking about, and then I'll kind of explain it. Let's talk about insurance. We've all gotten trained during this period of the welfare state everyone wants to pay $100 a month and then get service like it's, from the Taj Mahal. And it just doesn't work that way. So what politicians do is they subsidize and they do price freezes and they try to regulate profit margins, and all they do is make it worse. So in California, let's start with the fire insurance in the Palisades. And you may have heard that State Farm, about a month before the fire hit, canceled 70% of the people that lived in the Palisades who had State Farm. In other words, let me rephrase that. They canceled all the State Farm fire insurance policies, and 70% of the people in the Palisades were insured with State Farm. So it looks like, if you think State Farm had a crystal ball, you would think they knew the fires were coming and were trying to get out. But the truth is, it was all about pricing. The risk in Palisades. So as I've shared with you guys before, insurance companies employ these guys called actuaries. And actuaries do nothing but spend time calculating the probability of risk. How likely is it that something's going to happen? And wildfires are part of California, and they were calculating that. And then they take a look at what they're insuring, what the risk really is, how much they would have to pay, and then they calculate the premium based on that, plus a small profit. They tend to make 5% profit, give or take a nickel. Well, or 5 to 10% typically, but it can be less, it can be more. It just depends, because risk fluctuates. Bottom line is, California put a freeze on how much an insurance company could charge, not just in Palisades, but everywhere. But when State Farm in particular looked at the Palisades and all those expensive homes, let's explain what's going on with the weather. And forget the climate change bullshit. That's just politicians being politicians, just so that you understand this. And fact check me. Storms have not become more severe. Hurricanes have not become more severe. Tornadoes have not become more severe. And the Santa Ana winds have not become more severe. They talk about like this is the first time any of this has happened. It's not. Then they talk about like this is the warmest winter since on recorded, ever recorded. The recordings only started in 1948. So let's not start thinking that we're going back, billions of years. We're talking about a very misleading statement. And most of the measuring stations, particularly the temperature measuring stations, are over 95% of them. Again, fact check me on this. Are incorrectly placed. In other words, when they were originally set up to measure temperature and things like that, the regulation says they have to be set up far away from concrete because concrete holds in a lot. In other words, urban areas, streets, sidewalks, driveways, it holds in a lot of heat. Well, over the years, the cities and the counties and the towns and everything else have grown, and they haven't moved these temperature stations. So the only thing that's changed is how much concrete is located around these temperature stations, which creates a lot of radiant and stored heat, which distorts the statistics. So basically, there has been no increase in temperature. That's a lot of bullshit too. Again, go fact check me. Okay. Not that the world isn't overall getting a little warmer, because we're coming to the end of a small ice age, which has nothing to do with climate change. The climate's changing slowly, but it has nothing to do with what we do. CO2 is not a pollutant. It is just well, plants love it. The world is the greenest it's been maybe since mankind settled. I mean, we're getting greener by the minute. The deserts are slowly disappearing because of increased CO2. And I could go into that science, but that's not what I was going to talk about. I was starting to go off into a tangent there. Let's get back. So what a Santa Ana wind is. Normally, the wind in California comes in off the ocean and cools the area. In the coastal zone of Southern California, it's like the most beautiful weather in the world because there's something called the Japanese current, which comes down from the North Pole, north to south, and circulates down the coast and cools off the water. And then that cooling, with a little bit of breeze, brings that cooling on shore. So even though Los Angeles and San Diego and everything in between are sitting in the middle of a desert, the same desert that I'm living in Phoenix, the reason that we get hot as hell in the summer and it's cool down by the beach are the onshore winds that are blowing in from across the Japanese current, thereby cooling down the wind, thereby cooling down the coast. Well, once in a while, what happens is a Santa Ana wind. And by the way, the shift in weather that's taken place, the reason that they went from 2 incredibly wet years to now this last 6 months of no rain is because El Nino has disappeared and La Nina has taken its place, which is a phenomenon in the Pacific Ocean that has, again, nothing to do with climate change. That happens all the time, and it was completely anticipated. And one of the entities that anticipated it was State Farm Insurance. And, they couldn't charge enough to break even. Now, if they were allowed to charge, let's just imagine a world where the government didn't try to regulate everything. Well, insurance in the Palisades would be very, very expensive. Therefore, there probably would have been less building and less purchasing because of artificially low insurance rates being forced by the state. Well, that distorted pricing. It distorted the pricing of the houses. It distorted the pricing of everything. And what's happened is that no one wants to come back in and insure it. And so now they're all left kind of high and dry, relying on this state fund called FAIR, and which doesn't begin to have enough money in it. And it's all because they screw with pricing. I'll give you another example. Newsom announced in an executive order that he was banning so-called price gouging. There is no such thing as price gouging. Okay, what he's calling price gouging is like increasing rents and increasing the cost of things, and he's trying to put a cap on it so as to not take advantage of the poor people that lost their homes. That all sounds great. I don't deny that sounds great, but here's what it really does. This is going to be the area that's burned just in the Palisades fire alone is 3 times the size of the entire island of Manhattan. Okay, it's a huge area. There are over 12,000 homes alone, not to mention businesses and everything else that have been destroyed. It's going to be a massive rebuilding effort, and they're going to need a lot of manpower and a lot of companies coming in to do it. Well, California, in particular, is a state with the highest income tax in the country and is heavily, heavily regulated. What would normally happen in a situation like this, let's say this had happened in Texas, there would have been no regulation on so-called price gouging. That would have made a lot of people in other states, a lot of guys with skills, construction people, construction firms, so on and so forth, come to California because they thought they could make some money, and the increased pricing, because again, supply and demand would cause this. There's a lot of demand right now with a very limited supply of contractors. So the price will short term go up, but that attracts in the contractors and the workers. Then as they all start coming in, they begin competing for business and the prices come back down and end up lower. And if you think back in your life, you've seen this happen before. So by capping the prices, no one's going to come. And so what the rebuilding, which might have taken a year or two, is going to end up taking a decade because they're shutting out any ability of it, or not the ability, the desire of anyone to come work in California. Not to mention, if you come work in California, not only is there a 13% income tax, but gasoline is like $6 a gallon and over because of they just tax the crap out of everything. So they're killing any incentive for anyone to come in. Does that make sense to you, Eric? Eric, baby, I don't hear you.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, it's really painful. It really is. And the strategy on this rebuild is terrible.
It's stupid. If you leave the market alone, it'll price appropriately. Like when rents go up, like they're going up right now in California because there's a lot of demand for it. What that does is give a lot of people incentives to build more apartments. And more apartments mean ultimately the prices come back down. But if you regulate, you say, well, there can't be any raises in rents. We're gonna do rent controls. You end up with what San Francisco has and New York has, which is sky high rents. Not enough people to go to build. They just don't build new ones because why would they? The rents are price controlled. So and the buildings that are rent controlled, they stop maintaining them because they can't make enough money to maintain them. This isn't a question of good guys versus bad guys. What the government's doing is they're doing short-term things that sound good, and then down the road, when there are consequences, they'll blame somebody else besides themselves. Don't fuck with pricing. Okay, the free market prices everything fairly if you just let it work. But if you screw with it, this is another example of checkers instead of chess. Even if Gavin Newsom was well-intentioned, which I doubt, because he's just a slum. I think the only thing that he's going to keep cheap in California is hair gel. Have you ever seen anyone put their hair back and he's like he's ready for the next hurricane to come up? Anyway, he's a schmuck.
Oh, so let's talk about the mayor.
Let's talk. The mayor. She's a waste of space, Karen Bass. How she got elected is beyond understanding to me. At some point, I hope people in California wake up and understand that the Democratic Party of California, if it was a one-party Republican state, they'd have the same problems. If you have one party and there's nobody to restrain the other, you get the worst of whatever the party might be. And in this case, it's incredible interference with markets, and they just turned the state into a shithole. And it should be the most magnificent place to live maybe in the world because of the resources, the natural beauty, and the great weather. But here we are.
And then Hollywood's getting involved too.
Well, I think you're going to
my thing burned down, and I'm mad.
Well, they're furious. Not to mention the fact that the scales are falling from their eyes. They're beginning to realize they've been lied to. And I think you're going to see some very interesting. I think Karen Bass ultimately is going to end up being recalled. We'll see. Though it's hard to recall a Democrat in California, but maybe not in Los Angeles. So far, I haven't seen her say an intelligent word. And I feel bad for the people of Los Angeles, but they elected that empty suit, so they're getting exactly what they kind of, I forget who said it, but it was some old British guy, like maybe the Earl of Mountbatten or something. Anyways, it's like, this is what you voted for. You're going to get it good and hard. You know what I mean? They voted for this woman. They're getting what they voted for, good and hard. You know what I mean? Like this is what life. There is a reason that you vote for one person or one party or over another. And in this case, it's because there are no. As far as I can tell, there are no competent Democrats in California. Not that I've seen an interview or heard of or written anything. I just don't understand where they're so busy saving smelt that. Anyway, that's all I want to say. Don't fuck with pricing. All right. Now we're going to move on to tariffs.
Hold on. Before we do that, the fire chief, you think they have tried to create a runway to put her under the bus as many times as possible?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, they're going to try to throw her under the bus. But I just saw, I don't know if you're aware of, there's a channel on YouTube and probably in other places too called the Free Press. And the Free Press is a dead down the center podcast. They're neither Democrats or Republicans. They're actually kind of left of center, really. But I like them because they give a very balanced view of everything. Anyway, they sent out a reporter to visit Los Angeles firehouses. It's a disgrace. The state of repair of the fire department, the lack of funding, the misdirection of resources has been going on for many, many, many years. And this fire chief, who was the diversity hire to begin with, is that they're going to try to throw her under the bus when she's certainly partially at blame, but broader, it's all of these politicians who, and starting with Karen Bass, who didn't do not properly fund the fire department. And they told the firefighters that if they start to give interviews, they'll be fired. The reason you're not seeing a lot of
no way.
Absolutely true. The word has come down through the union, the firefighters union, which is in bed with the Democrats, that if you go on the air and start to expose, this isn't an isolated thing. There's so much mold in Los Angeles firehouses that a chief recently died. That I'm not making this up. That a lot of them sleep outside of the firehouse because of mold infestation. There's one firehouse that's down on the water where they sleep on boats outside the firehouse so they don't have to go in. That's just the mold problem. They have broken doors, they went to the boneyard of where they keep the fire engines, and there's dozens of them just sitting there that are new, ready to be used, but they're in disrepair, and there's no money to buy the parts to fix them. I mean,
you can't pay the mechanic. Also, you can't pay the mechanic. They can't. No. They don't have the funding to do that. That makes no sense. No.
Well, they were busy building the high-speed rail. I mean, maybe they should use the high-speed rail to bring in the workers and supplies they're going to need, except that they've spent $10 billion. This is a typical of California. They've spent over $10 billion building this high-speed rail. It was supposed to connect Los Angeles with San Francisco. Then they realized they can't do that, so then they started it in Bakersfield, of all the places in the world. And if you're wondering to yourself right now, where's Bakersfield, California? Look at a map, but it's basically, not to denigrate Bakersfield, but it's not a place you would go for any reason unless you live there. It's in the middle of it's in the San Joaquin Valley. It's an agricultural town. And then they couldn't connect it with San Francisco because of environmental rules and yada, yada, yada. So they just announced they're going to connect Fresno. Well, I've been to Fresno. In fact, I had a summer job in Fresno when I was a kid working in a tomato packing warehouse. Let me tell you something. Fresno is not a garden spot. No one. Bakersfield to Fresno, and get this: $10 billion. They haven't built any track yet. $10 billion. That's all been spent. And there's been some building of preliminary infrastructure, but that's it. There's no high-speed rail to anywhere. This has been going on for a decade, and it's all been on studies and environmental. What it is a giant gravy train, and that's how this state operates. Again, when you have a one-party state, they make corruption legal. And by the way, they announced this week that instead of going to San Francisco, they're going to build the high-speed rail to Las Vegas. So if they were to somehow, and they're asking for another $20 billion, so somehow if they can complete it, they'll run it from Bakersfield to Las Vegas, which makes absolutely no sense. So I guess you would drive from LA to Bakersfield and get on the train, but that's a long drive. It'd be a lot easier just to take a plane. So this is what happens. Nobody was asking for the goddamn train. It's typical California. There was no demand for it. There was no public saying, whoa, I wish we had a train that, that's just not the way they operate in California. I used to live in California. It's a car-centered economy. So anyway, I could go on. They're just so goddamn stupid. It's just hard to believe there are people dumb enough to do all this stuff. That's the part that blows me away every time.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway.
Well, I think we should take a quick break. Okay.
Oh, should we? Okay.
Yeah. Let's
come back and talk tariffs.
Yeah, let's do that.
Okay, rock on. Let's go away. We'll be back in a minute or two, however long Eric's going to run these spots. Because I don't really know. I just smile.
Ready to take your craft to the next level? Imagine faster extractions, purer products, and more profits. Sounds good, right? At Pure 5 Extraction, we've revolutionized cannabis extraction with our game-changing technology. No solvents, no heat, just the cleanest, most natural process on the market. Whether you're a boutique grower or a large-scale operation, Pure 5 has the tools to elevate your business worldwide. Visit pure5extraction.com today. Pure 5 Extraction, because your plants...
This air conditioner isn't working again. I'm roasting in here.
Hi there. I'm from Canaloo Air. I'm here to fix your air conditioner.
Canaloo Air is a family-owned HVAC company that specializes in residential air conditioning and heating. We offer a variety of services, including installation, replacement, repair, and maintenance. Canaloo Air. We keep your home comfortable all year round. Call us today for a free quote. Why Canaloo Air? Here are the top 5 reasons. Family-owned and operated. We are committed to high-quality service. Our technicians use the highest quality parts and equipment. The business is a member of the Home Advisor Elite Service Award Program. And finally, we have an A+ rating with the Better Business Bureau. visit our website, caniluair.com, or call us today, 602-609-3480, to schedule.
Window tint isn't just about keeping a low profile anymore. Introducing XPEL Prime XR Plus, the most technologically advanced automotive window film ever created. Prime XR Plus features multi-layer nanoparticle technology designed to provide unrivaled performance. The unique multi-layer construction blocks up to 98% of infrared heat, keeping your vehicle's interior cool no matter the weather. Prime XR Plus also provides superior UV rejection, so you and your passengers stay safe from harmful cancer-causing rays. In the past, the only option was installing a darker shade. With Prime XR Plus, you can reap the benefits from our lightest tint to our darkest without compromising performance or visibility. With a digital world, clear communication is key. Unlike other high IR blocking window films, Prime XR Plus won't interfere with cell, radio, or data signal transmissions. Performance at its best. It's prime time. XPEL Prime XR Plus. Ask for it by name today.
Okay, we're back. I got to say, by the way, I have to share, I'm not a big fan of AI voices. Like when they mispronounce the name of the sponsor, Canilu, I don't know. Yeah. Call me crazy. I don't dig it. I don't think AI is quite as slick as people think it is. I don't know what your experience is of it, Eric, but my experience of it is it's almost ready, but not quite. I don't know. Maybe I don't like AI voices. When I hear them like on a YouTube channel, I delete that channel. I don't want to hear it. But I'm crazy that way. What do you think?
All right. Yeah, it's getting better. Probably every 6 months, hey, there's an improvement.
You know what they ought to do? They ought to hire me to do their voiceover. I'm just saying. I know how to say cantaloupe. I know how to say Pure 5 extractions and cannabis. Just throwing that out there if you happen to talk to them. Anyway, let's talk about tariffs. So the Treasury Secretary nominee this week, Scott Bessent, went before the Senate for his confirmation hearings. By the way, those hearings are just terrible. I mean, Trump's going to get his entire cabinet, as far as I can tell. But what are the Democrats are asking about people's sex lives? I mean, grow up. Anyway, I happen to love when that one senator, I think he's from some southern state. I don't know which one, but pointed out that the senators come to make votes drunk. And the funny part was I was watching the hearing on Pete Hegseth when Tim Kaine from Virginia was going after him on his past bouts with alcoholism, as if, take one look at Tim Kaine and you know that he's a hardcore drinker. Look at his skin and his nose. I mean, okay. I'm going off into a tangent. Clowns to the left, jokers to the right. Here I am, stuck in the middle with you. All right, let's talk about tariffs. So I am not a tariff guy. I'm not a big believer in tariffs, but I'm going to make the case now that Scott Bessent made so that you understand how Trump can use tariffs and where it will not cause a lot of problems. So first of all, understand that tariffs are not inflationary. I know that that's a Democratic charge. If they put a 10 or a 20% tariff on everything, prices will all go up 10 or 20%. That's not really true. It'll go up 10 or 20% on that specific item. It has nothing to do with the rest of the economy. There's only one thing that causes inflation, and that is printing too much money. Too much money chasing too few goods. Inflation is always and everywhere a monetary phenomenon. If a central bank prints too much money, as ours did to cover the debt run up by the Biden administration with all the bullshit trillions they spent, that's inflation. What happens with tariffs is you get a one-time jump. Now, let's say that they were to place a 10% tariff on all Chinese goods. Just hypothetically, the first thing that would happen is the value of the dollar would go up about 4%. Now, I didn't just pull that number out of my rear end, and neither did Scott Bessent. I'm actually using the numbers that he used. Where he gets it is there's a lot of well-done economic studies that are properly structured, not propaganda, that are older than this election cycle, that have studied this very closely for decades and decades. And when tariffs go up, the currency of the country putting on the tariffs tends to go up as well. And in this case, based on some math that neither one of us is going to understand, it'll go up about the value of the dollar go up about 4%. Now, that's a good thing. Okay, great countries have great money, so strengthening the dollar is a good thing. And if the value of the money goes up 4%, then we're down to a 6% net effect on the price of whatever it is they're putting the tariff on to U.S. consumers. But then, we don't live in a monopoly. So there tends to be an increase in sales, and this is what they're trying to do for the domestic producers, because there's more, it's not like China makes something that only China makes, and therefore that increases the GDP by the amount of the tariff, and the tariff ends up becoming a wash. It ends up being nothing. And then if you take it a step further, and this is where I would go with it, if you replace the income tax with tariffs and say put a 20% tariff on everything coming into the United States, prices would jump one time, probably 20%, except that's not really true either, because the foreign companies that are bringing products into the country, they know that their product's becoming less competitive, and what that makes them do is two things: lower their prices and lower their profit margins to offset the amount of the tariffs, and then to ultimately get around them, build plants and employ people in the United States. So properly done and carefully done and smartly done, tariffs don't necessarily cause a problem. Now, I'm opposed to them because I use words like smartly and, efficiently, cleverly, whatever words you want to, whatever adjective you want to use or adverb. All of this depends on the government executing, which I have a lot of doubt about. And so they could easily become a giant mess. But assuming that Trump is using them just as a threat more than actually doing them, and that's what I think he's doing. I think the reason he told his staff this week that he wants to fly right after he's inaugurated tomorrow, he'd like to make one of his first trips to China. That's not some kind of coincidence. He wants to go look Xi in the eye face to face and negotiate a different trade arrangement with China. Trump understands, even though our press doesn't seem to want to point it out, that China is in deep, deep, deep shit. And they're not in a recession. They're in a depression. They're in a full-scale depression in China, and it's getting worse. And what they're trying to do is export their way out of it. And that's why China, for example, ran a $1 trillion trade surplus this year, which sounds like it would be a good thing. It's actually a sign that they're weak. The reason that the United States has a trade deficit and China has a trade surplus is because our people are allowed to buy whatever we fucking well please, and we have the money to do it. Think about it. So there's a lot of products that we like that are foreign made, like the computer that I'm sitting here and talking to you on is an Acer. And Acers are not made in the United States, but I bought it because it was the best value. And so I lost the track of this point I was going to make. There is competition, and it drives down the value of tariffs. But when China tries to do it by export, what they're doing is they're not spending the time and the resources that they need to grow their own domestic consumption. And because of their declining birth rate, and declining is a gentle word for it, it's a crashing population. They lost the statistic. The official statistic is that China once again had more people die than born, and that's if you believe their bullshit official statistics. And without a free press, you never know if their statistic can be believed or not. So probably it's much, 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 much worse than what the Chinese are letting on to. Anyway, Trump knows this. He's going to go over there and negotiate with Xi. Meanwhile, I was talking about deficit versus surplus. So Americans have a deficit because we buy a lot of foreign stuff because we can, and we like it. We like BMWs and we like Toyotas, but those are two companies who understood that there could be tariffs, and so they build a lot of their cars here in the United States, which is what the effect of tariffs do. And so China's trade surplus is a reflection of the fact that their people don't have enough money to buy anything. So they export a ton of stuff, but the people aren't making enough money from the exports to go out and buy a ton of stuff as consumers. So their consumer market at home is terrible. And so the trade poor countries have trade surpluses. Rich countries have trade deficits. And there really is no such thing as a trade deficit because, and the thought is what a trade deficit is we spend our money and we get the goods, and they get more of our money than they spend on our stuff, and so therefore that difference between what we spend and what they spend on our country stuff that we're exporting to their country and theirs to ours is out of balance according to economists. But that's bullshit, because we get what they're forgetting is if you buy a Chinese EV, which I don't even know if they're being sold in the United States. Eric, are you aware, are Chinese EVs being sold in the United States? I don't know. Haven't seen them. Eric has disappeared into the ozone. I hope
I'm here.
Talking to myself. There you are.
It takes a minute to like press the right buttons. So, yeah, I haven't heard about any EVs coming over at all. But yeah.
The whole point is that we can buy stuff and they can't, and that's why they have a surplus and we have a deficit, and it's meaningless. Because if you were to, let's say, okay, let's go to a German car. Let's say that you were to buy an Audi. Well, the Germans got the money, and we have a trade deficit with Germany, but we got the Audi. And when you consider that the money is toilet paper, there's nothing behind it but a wish and a prayer, we're getting the better end of the deal. The Audi can't just go away. The money is just nothing. In a lot of ways, you're much better off with a trade deficit, especially when you're using fiat currency, because you're paying for things with money that ultimately is worth nothing except what you think it's worth for things that are real. Am I making myself clear?
Yeah, you are.
Does that make sense? Yeah. So, when we buy grapes from Chile and socks from China and whatever we're buying from India, all this stuff, we get the actual stuff. And the money really tomorrow could be worthless, right? We've talked about that a lot.
Yeah,
so the whole term trade deficit is not the only thing that's important to notice from those statistics is that China's going down the drain because they're running a trade surplus. And that would be a tragedy for the world because we being the entire rest of the planet, still manufacture about a third of everything on Earth in China. Okay. Oh, you want to do some speed round? Okay. I guess I've done Eric. Yeah, Eric sent me the message, guys, that I've spent too long in trade deficits and tariffs. Listen, I'm not a big fan of tariffs because I have doubts about the government execution, but I'd be all for it if they would simply repeal the income tax. By the way, prior to the early 1900s, when we placed an income tax for the first time, that's how the federal government funded itself. And if it was funding itself with tariffs and we had no income tax, that would be a good world. I'd trade a one-time price increase for not having to ever file taxes again and to take home every penny I make on a paycheck. Just saying.
Just saying. All right, let's move into the speed round. All right, Israel. The Israel Hamas ceasefire. Is it going to stick? Is it going to hold?
No, it's not going to stick. It's not going to hold. Hamas has been, according to them, for technical reasons, they haven't even yet released the names of the first 3 hostages that they're supposedly releasing this afternoon. I think that out of the approximately 90-something hostages, all but, according to what Israel thinks, all but 33 or 34 are dead. It might be much higher than that. I mean, sometimes the simplest explanation and the real explanation are the same thing. That's the Occam's razor. That's a variation of Occam's razor. Why hasn't Hamas turned over the names yet? Maybe because they're dead. I don't know. I hope I'm wrong.
No proof of life.
We'll see if 3 people walk out this afternoon. We'll see what happens. But I think in the end, Hamas knows if they turn over all those hostages, then Israel's just going to restart the war. This is not a truce. It's not the end of the war. It's a temporary ceasefire. Stage 1 is they give up 33 hostages in return for shit tons of Palestinian prisoners, which I understand from a Jewish point of view that, one Jewish life is more important than 1,000 of their, whatever. I understand. But no, I don't think it's going to hold. I don't think Hamas is going to keep the deal. Okay. I think Netanyahu went along with it only because he has a lot of domestic pressure from the parents and the families to look like he's doing something. And I think it's going to fall apart and give him the justification he needs to go in. And now he knows that Trump is a much more pro-Israel president than Biden. And the only reason that Hamas even agreed this far is because they're afraid of Trump's all hell breaking loose. That is what did it. I don't give a shit who says what. That's what did it. This reminds me very much of when Jimmy Carter had the hostages it was nearly 500 days stuck in Iran. And then Ronald Reagan, they turned them loose on Inauguration Day because they were afraid of Ronald Reagan. And by the same token, they're afraid of Donald Trump. So, and he's made it crystal clear, what his intention is. So Do I think the truce is going to hold? No, I don't think it's going to hold. I think what's going to happen is, and I've said this before, is that once Donald Trump's inaugurated, Israel, the United States, probably Great Britain along with this, possibly other countries, it just depends, certainly Italy, maybe France, will initiate a joint attack on both the Iranian nuclear facilities as well as the Houthis down in Yemen. They're just going to annihilate them. And I think that that's where all hell's going to let loose. And it's going to be a very interesting period of time. But no, I don't think the ceasefire is going to hold.
All right. Next speed round item, the indoor inauguration day.
I'll bet you a ton of money this is because of security, not because of weather. That's what I think. I don't think they're talking about it. Yeah, I think it's security. 20 degrees in Washington, that's really cold, but it's not Alaska. You know what I mean? And people have traveled thousands of miles to come to this inauguration, and Trump is well aware of it, and so are the officials. And people do have warm weather clothes. People who live in Minnesota, 20 degrees is about where you go swimming. You know what I mean? It's cold. Now, by my measure, I'm freezing cold if it's below 60. I'm positively chattering. But I live in the middle of the desert, right? Cold. I don't think cold has a thing. If it was 20 below zero, I might have bought that story. But okay. I don't buy the 20 degrees we have to go inside story. I don't know if they're going to release it or not, but it's got to be a security threat. My feeling is they got wind of maybe like Iranian assassin teams are in the country and they're going to be coming. It's always made me nervous to watch like the president-elect walk down Pennsylvania Avenue. To me, I don't know how they cover all those windows. Do you know what I mean? And
there's a lot of open air.
Yes. Plus, if history teaches us anything, it's that if an assassin doesn't care about getting away, they will succeed. The only thing that stops assassins or that most of them still want to get away. And so they look at the situation and think, we'll never get away. But then you get a guy, like a Muslim fanatic who doesn't care if he gets away and will even blow himself up in the crowd. And there are plenty of ways to avoid detectors. They can't frisk every single. They're expecting a crowd of 500,000 minimum. You can't frisk 500,000 people. I think what's going on here is security. That's what I think. And if that's the case, I'm glad. The worst thing that could possibly happen is for Trump to get killed on Inauguration Day. That would just be beyond belief.
Okay.
So that's
all right. Let's move on.
I can't prove it. Okay.
Let's move on. TikTok outlook. What do you think? What's going to happen?
I think Trump's going to be inaugurated. I think they're going to find a way to work this out. I know at least two different bidders. There's a company in Cleveland, Ohio that's interested in TikTok. And then, wait a minute, I'm confusing U.S. Steel with TikTok. But there are other buyers for TikTok who want it. There's a company in Cleveland that wants to buy U.S. Steel over Nippon Steel, but that's another subject. I got it conflated. TikTok will end up eventually working it out, and Trump understands the economic importance of TikTok because it's become a huge marketplace, and a lot of small business people sell their wares on TikTok. Let's put aside the whether or not Chinese algorithms are brainwashing, teenage girls or whatever the situation might be. I don't know. I'm with Trump on this one. I think find a way around this. Let people use it. The government has this thing about thinking we're all too stupid to recognize a bad message. And I think that, letting the government censor and shut down operations.
Yeah.
Anyway, ridiculous.
Right.
TikTok's going to, don't worry, guys. They're going to reopen TikTok and they're going to get an American buyer. And maybe it might even be Elon Musk. And it'll all work out.
All right. Two more things. Trump day one, top 3 or 4 things that you feel are going to happen day one.
Well, it's no surprise. He's already announced that he's going to sign over 100 executive orders. He'll repeal a lot of regulation. The thing that I'm looking forward to, that I think would be the most interesting thing, is I think he's going to pardon Ross Ulbricht. Do you know who Ross Ulbricht is?
No, I don't.
Okay, so Ross Ulbricht is a cause celeb, as they say, of libertarians. When Trump went to give a speech at the Libertarian Party way back, a lot of people don't remember this, he promised to release Ross Ulbricht if the Libertarians voted for him. So the Libertarian Party, they had a very weak candidate, but the official party itself threw its support behind Trump, and they kept they kept their end of the bargain. They had a deal. So Ross Ulbricht's going to be released. Ross Ulbricht is a young man who developed the Silk Road. Are you aware of what the Silk Road was?
No.
Okay, the Silk Road was a think of it as like eBay that nobody could track the transactions, and they were all done by Bitcoin, and it was all private transactions, and the governments couldn't see into it, and so there was a tremendous amount of things like fentanyl and things like that being sold on Silk Road, in addition to other things, and so the government, Ross Ulbricht himself was not dealing drugs. And they accused him of ordering a hit on somebody, which is just made up bullshit. But anyway, he's really just a nice young man who they've locked up with 2 consecutive life terms for running a trade website and made up a bunch of. It's the biggest railroading ever. It's just ridiculous. This kid is going to sit in prison for the rest of his life over creating a website. And yes, drugs were traded over the website, but if by that logic, drugs are paid for mostly by dollars. So let's just shut down the dollar because it's being used by drug. Come on, grow up. This was a political prosecution, and Ross Ulbricht should be freed. And I think that's going to be Trump's going to do that on day one. That's going to be, from my point of view, the most meaningful thing. Executive orders, to me, are like a bad habit we've all gotten into. That the president bypasses the Congress, which is only too happy to let him do it by executive order, because that means they don't have to go on the record officially as to whether they support it or not. So if it turns out being a shitstorm later, they can pretend like they never voted for it and just blame the president for it. So that's why they get away. But executive orders are about as effective as writing a contract on water, because the next president can just overturn them. Most of the 100 executive orders that Trump's going to do on day one are just overturning the stupid shit that Biden's been doing out of sheer spite on his way out the door. By the way, did you see that Biden pardoned cop killers in Virginia? Did you see that story?
Yeah, I saw that.
Unfucking believable. If just as an aside, you couldn't do a better job of trying to destroy the Biden legacy than Biden's doing himself. Right. There is no legacy. His legacy is by far the shittiest president that ever lived. And they're all worried about prosecutions. They ought to be worried about prosecutions because there was a giant cover-up of this man's dementia that started in 2017, and that's got to be a crime. They hid from the American people material facts. You know what I mean? It's going to be interesting to see between Pam Bondi at the Attorney General's office and Kash Patel at the FBI. I think that there's a lot of people that are in trouble. And I know I'm going to sound like a Republican partisan, and I'm not. The political prosecution of Donald Trump, there was just nothing there. That was a pure political bullshit. They made his 34 counts, which most people don't know what his 34 felonies are, was for the improper entry of data on a form. That's what they escalated a misdemeanor into a felony. That's why it's all going to get thrown out. It will never survive appeal. It's all bullshit. They picked the target and made up a crime to fit the target that they wanted to get, as opposed to what they did in the case of Biden's dementia, which is they materially, ahead of an election, before anyone knew anything, conspired to hide material facts from the American people that no one would have voted for him if they knew how far gone he was.
Right.
So, yeah, I think there's going to be Trump Day 1's going to be interesting. And the prosecutions are what's going to be really interesting. A lot of people, Adam Schiff, easily could go to prison. Yeah. I mean, the man is lying doesn't begin to describe his operation. But lying is not a crime, but lying to conceal things from the American people or to personally enrich yourself is. And by the way, I saw a list, the Washington Post, it was either the Washington Post or the New York Times, ran a story yesterday about who was involved in the conspiracy. And at the top of that list was Mrs. Biden and Hunter. I mean, how does Hunter Biden, a crackhead, get in a position to make decisions for an administration? I mean, I understand he's Biden's son, but if you go back to the Carter presidency, and I'm not changing the subject, and I'm using it because, as we know, President Carter was just buried. He had a brother. Do you remember this? Are you old? No, you're not old enough to remember this. No. His name was Billy Carter. And Billy was a fuck-up. He was an alcoholic fuck-up, but he's kind of funny. And the press, found him, and he would sit in his front porch down in Plains, Georgia, drinking beer and making fun of his own brother. He's like the family. He was, God rest his soul, like the family black sheep. I think if memory serves, he actually died of complications of alcoholism. But the point is that Carter never let him anywhere near the White House. Just saying. Carter loved his brother. He never denounced him. He was always, a good brother. But a good brother doesn't mean you let him anywhere near the power in the United States. And the biggest problem with a demented president is, and the article pointed this out, nobody was in charge of the nuclear football. The briefcase that goes around. Who would have made? Thank God he didn't have to, but there was nobody in a position that was competent to make a decision to launch a nuclear counterattack in the event we were attacked. It boggles the mind. But anyway.
All right, last one. Our friends up to the north, Canada, and trade.
Okay, so Canada's about to have a change of government. Justin Trudeau, who is, I can't believe our Canadian friends elected him in the first place, is gone. He's already resigned. He's just waiting to be replaced in his own party. But the next Prime Minister of Canada, in all likelihood, is a man named Pierre Poilievre. And he's very conservative. He's a Tory. And he and Trump have already had it out a little bit. But I think that he's actually going to end up being a good friend of Trump. I think at a very basic level, they're on the same page. And all this noise about Canada and trade and unfair and all this crap, in the end, Canada is our second largest trading partner after Mexico. And Mexico is doing such a good job of torpedoing its own economy that soon Canada will regain, which it once had, the position as our number one trading partner. And I think Pierre Poilievre is going to be a breath of fresh air. And I think he and Trump are going to get along great. And I think our trade with Canada will not end up with sanctions. These threats are just threats. That's just a negotiating ploy. There's going to be some adjustments, yada, 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 some give and some take. Poilievre will be able to claim victory on some crap, and Trump. But the end result's going to be pipelines are going to reopen. Trade between the United States and Canada is going to increase, particularly in the energy sector. And of course it will. And Canada is not going to become the 51st. That's just silly. And it's going to be fine. This is just all we're witnessing is the end of Trudeau and Biden, two giant pieces of shit. And they're almost done. And
let's wrap it up.
Let's wrap it up. Listen, guys, go to Amazon right now and buy a copy of A Radical Reset, the Anti-Politics Manifesto. If you're tired of politics as they are, if you're tired of politicians of both parties making corruption legal by making certain kinds of campaign contributions that are obvious bribes legal, if you'd like politics without money, without the poison of ambition, without people turning it into a career, if you want terms limited, if you want a true republic, read this book, A Radical Reset. Pick it up on Amazon. I wrote it, so I'm bragging. But what I think you'll find interesting is if you look at the copyright of the book, it's 2019. I actually wrote the book in 2017, and you're going to find a lot of the things. Well, I was just dead on. Everything I said in the book was going to happen, happened. Now, that's not because, by the way, I have a crystal ball or I'm psychic or anything like that. It's because I'm not clouded by, ambition, secretly wanting me to become the president or some bullshit like that. I have no ulterior motive. And my only motive is to when the shit hits the fan, and it's going to hit the fan. As I talked about in our last episode, Trump could easily end up becoming the most unlucky president in American history. He has a lot of good ideas, but if the dollar collapses under him, it's not his fault, though he'll get blamed. But at the very same time, it will take very little to set up a dollar collapse. So pick up the book, read what the alternative, because we don't have a democratic alternative, which is what anti-politism is. I don't like the word democracy. I like republic. But if I say Republican alternative, it sounds like I'm shilling for the Republican Party. Anyway, I'm not. I'm not a Republican. I'm not going to be a Republican. I'm a lifelong libertarian, actually. And really, the world would be a better place with a lot less government. I wish there was no government, but since we have to have some, wouldn't it be better to have a government entirely based on merit, service based on duty, and making it completely impossible to get rich in office? I mean, the Obamas are worth $100 million, and let's be honest, Barack Obama never practiced law. Where the hell did that come from? Legalize corruption, my friends. Legalize corruption. Okay, what else do we have to cover, Big Eric?
That's it. That's a wrap.
Well, it's a wrap. Then you guys have a beautiful rest of your week. I hope you enjoyed this. Pass it along to your friends. Please share, like, and all that other kind of stuff that I don't even know the order of, the ring the little bell and all that stuff. I'll be back next week. So will my friend Eric. And until then, have a beautiful week and peace out.